It is one of the cases that shook Egyptian society, and it is one of the most heinous crimes of adultery and the mixing of lineages you can ever hear about. After hearing its events, you will feel shock and amazement, and you will learn that your end might come at the hands of the people closest to you, and that those you entrust with your life and the life of your family might be the cause of its destruction and the commission of crimes. The story began in the Monufia Governorate in the Arab Republic of Egypt. Soad, an Egyptian woman, lived with her small family consisting of a mother, a father, a daughter, and a son. The daughter was Soad, the eldest, and the son was named Saber. Not many suitors came forward for Soad, and because of this, she married late in life. A few months into her marriage, problems arose in her life due to her continuous nervousness over the most trivial reasons. When her husband could no longer tolerate her nature, he divorced her, left her, and departed. When she asked his family about him, they told her they knew nothing about him and didn't know where he had gone. So she returned to her parents' house, heartbroken and overwhelmed with sadness, and once again lived with her mother and brother. A month after her divorce, she learned she was pregnant. Upon hearing the news, she was very sad because she didn't want to have a child from her ex-husband. But as time passed, she accepted the idea of her pregnancy. The months passed until God blessed her, and she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. As soon as her brother, Saber, saw the little girl and her beauty, he named her Qamar. Qamar meaning moon. A year after the birth, Soad and Saber's mother passed away, and grief took hold of their father. From that day on, Qamar became everything in their lives, until she reached the age of 7. Throughout these years, she became attached to her maternal uncle due to his kindness and intense love for her. Saber was also very attached to her, spending all his money on his sister and her daughter. However, this situation changed completely because Saber got a job in Cairo, and it was impossible for him to refuse the travel. He did travel, leaving them alone. Qamar was affected by her uncle's distance, and he was even sadder than she was. But he called her every day to hear her voice so he wouldn't feel far from her. One day while Saber was at work, he received a call from a neighbor in Monufia who informed him of the worst news he could hear. His sister and her daughter had been in an accident and both were in the hospital in critical condition. Saber immediately traveled and went to the hospital. The doctors told him that his sister's condition was difficult and her chances of survival were slim, but her daughter's condition was much better than her mother's. Only a few hours passed before his sister surrendered her soul to her creator. Saber collapsed due to the death of his elder sister, but in contrast, Qamar's condition improved and God saved her. At that moment, Saber became even more attached to Qamar, as she was the last thing left to him in the world after the loss of his mother and sister. Weeks passed and the girl recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Saber closed his mother's apartment, took Qamar, and traveled with her to Cairo, where their lives became confined to the two of them.
Years passed, and the little girl grew up and finished the primary school stage. However, Saber prevented her from completing her education for no clear reason, virtually locking her within the walls of the small apartment they lived in. Qamar tried to understand why he prevented her from studying, but his answers were not convincing, full of naive excuses, until he told her that he feared for her from people and began to instill in her the idea of isolation. He allowed her no privacy. Every single thing she knew, even the simplest details, she would tell Saber. Because she was a young girl whose boundary of knowledge was the small world her uncle had drawn for her, she began to carry out his words without any objection. With difficulty, Saber allowed her to interact with their neighbors, and only to a very limited extent. This was because she would sit alone all day while he was at work, so he permitted her to go to them or sit with them if she needed anything until he returned from his job. Years passed until Qamar grew up and the signs of womanhood appeared on her body. At that time, Saber's treatment of her changed too. He became jealous, isolating her even more than before. He even banned her from the neighbors and locked the doors and windows on her.
Over time, Saber was no longer normal. Jealousy completely possessed him, and he became disproportionately angry over the smallest things. He also began trying to stay away from the house and return late. When Qamar asked him about the reason for his delay, He would shout at her and tell her that he was free, and that she was not allowed to ask him about anything he did. One day, he returned late as usual. But the new thing was that he was not steady, and it was clear that he had drunk something. That day, he entered the room where Qamar was and found her sleeping. When she sensed his presence, she woke up to prepare food for him, but Saber grabbed her arm and threw her onto the bed, and in a moment, he sexually assaulted her.
After what happened, Qamar collapsed and was broken. She never imagined harm would come to her from the only person she had in the world. The tragedy was that Saber showed no remorse. On the contrary, it was clear that he was pleased. After a silence that lasted between them for more than a week, Saber spoke to Qamar and told her that he loved her, that she belonged only to him, and that no one would take her from him. When she heard this, she feared him even more.
One day, Qamar woke up and waited until Saber went down to his work. She got up, gathered her clothes, took the money her uncle kept in the cupboard, left the house, and went to the train station. She was trying to go to her grandmother's house where she grew up. She asked how to travel to Monufia until she boarded the train and arrived there, but she didn't know how to reach the house because she couldn't remember the address. She sat at the station crying, overwhelmed by fear, and remained seated for more than 5 hours. A station employee noticed her strange behavior and advised her to return to Cairo. Qamar initially refused, but after a while, she was convinced by his words due to her fear. She boarded the train and returned to Cairo, then went to Saber's house. The moment she entered, she found the house in a state of chaos and wreckage, and Saber was not there. She entered her room and locked herself in. After a long time, Saber returned and found her in front of him. The moment he saw her, he almost hit her, but he stopped himself, warned her, and told her that if she did that again, he would kill her. Until one day, Qamar became very ill, so Saber took her to the doctor to check on her. After the examination, both were shocked by the news of her pregnancy and that she was already in the 3rd month. Saber tried to convince the doctor to perform an abortion, but the doctor refused. Saber had no choice but to let the pregnancy complete, but they had to leave the apartment. Afterward, he moved and rented an apartment far away from the old place. The people in the new area and building learned that they were married. Saber would sit in the cafe and made them understand that his wife was from a rural village, much younger than him, and had no one. People welcomed them and they lived among them safely. On the day of delivery, Qamar gave birth to twins, a girl and a boy, but the girl had a facial deformity, a cleft lip, and the boy was sick and died after a few hours. Qamar returned home with the little girl and named her Salma, but they did not issue a birth certificate for her as they feared their secret would be exposed. Qamar surrendered to the reality, and Saber convinced her that it was wrong for her to leave him and that he was his wife in front of everyone. After a while, Qamar forgot that he was her uncle and became his wife, and they lived together like any married couple. Saber changed for the worse. He became addicted to drugs and quit his job. After a few years, Qamar became pregnant by him again, but this time, Saber told her that he would not abort the pregnancy and that he had another idea, to sell the baby after birth. Qamar also changed. The forbidden completely controlled her, and she did not object to his words. After the birth, he took the child and sold it to the family he had arranged with.
Days and years passed, with Saber and Qamar sinking deeper into sin. The same thing was repeated 2 more times. Qamar would become pregnant and give birth, and Saber would sell the children. Eventually, their daughter Salma grew up and turned 10 years old. Salma was afraid for anyone to see her because of her appearance, and she was always confining herself within the house. Qamar grew up and reached the age of 26, and her thinking changed for the worse. Money became the most important thing to her. She worked several jobs and literally did the impossible to bring in money.
One day, Saber told her that he had found a new job for her in a cafeteria owned by a friend of his. Qamar didn't think twice and agreed immediately.
The cafeteria owner was impressed with Qamar as soon as he saw her. Saber then left Qamar and walked away under the pretext of a quick errand. Qamar understood that the cafeteria job was just a lure for something else, and principles or morals no longer mattered to her. The situation evolved to where Qamar started going out with customers and engaging in illicit relations with them for money. It reached the point where Saber was the one who would drop her off to the customers and take the money himself.
One day, Qamar heard Salma crying and found her hysterical. Salma told her she had become afraid to leave the house because of people's comments about her appearance. Since her daughter was Qamar's weak point, she promised her that she would undergo surgery to fix her problem. Qamar went and consulted several specialized doctors for the cleft lip operation, and an appointment was set. Salma had the surgery and her appearance changed. She became a completely different person. At that time, she was 14 years old, and her psychological condition improved. Qamar was happy for her daughter, and for the first time, Saber looked at Salma, focusing on her appearance, and told Qamar that she was a copy of her when she was young. 2 years later, Qamar suddenly became ill and was unable to stand on her feet. After tests, the result, which was a shock to her and Saber, revealed that she had lung cancer.
Qamar's condition worsened, and cancer took hold of her. Naturally, she stopped working and stayed home. Saber no longer liked her sitting around and began to look at Salma. One night, Saber returned, looking abnormal and staggering from drugs. He entered Qamar's room, woke her up, and told her that he wanted to take Salma on a work trip. Qamar was terrified and screamed at him. Saber did not like her words, so he left her, went into Salma's room, woke her up, and told her to get dressed because she had a job. Qamar entered and fought with him and slapped him. He grabbed her and hit her with all his strength until she fell to the ground and stopped speaking. He then picked her up, put her in her room, and locked the door. Saber returned to Salma, locked the door, and pounced on her, saying, "What I did to your mother long ago, I will do to you now." He tried to assault her, but Salma fought back. He grabbed her hair and slammed her head into the edge of the bed. Salma was injured in the head, and her entire face was covered in blood. Saber tore her clothes, but he didn't manage to do anything to her because Qamar was standing behind him, plunging a knife into his back. Saber fell to the floor, screaming in pain, writhing as his soul left his body. When Salma saw what happened, she opened the apartment door, went out, and kept screaming, gathering people, after which she fainted. Qamar came out and asked one of the neighbors to call the police. Police officers arrived, Saber's body was transferred, and Salma and Qamar were arrested. At the police station, Qamar recounted everything in detail, saying that Saber was not her husband but her uncle, and he had assaulted her since she was 16 years old. When the officer asked her, "Why did you kill him?" she replied that she was disgusted with her life with him and that death was the only solution for Saber. She said she didn't realize what she was doing the moment she heard her daughter scream and remembered the day she lost her virginity at the hands of her uncle. She got up, took her biggest knife, entered the room, and the moment she saw him attempting to assault her daughter, she didn't realize herself until she was plunging the knife into his back. Qamar was referred to the North Cairo Criminal Court, and in 2018, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. As for Salma, as soon as she learned of her mother's confessions, she suffered a nervous shock and was referred to one of the institutions specializing in the care of prisoners' children.
When a person becomes accustomed to a specific sin, their conscience dies over time, and they become habituated to committing it, forgetting its magnitude and hideousness. Therefore, when we raise our children with a religious upbringing and instill in them values and principles, teaching them right from wrong, the probability of someone like Saber emerging in society will be very low. May God protect our children and guide us all.